All right. Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome to My Green Pets. I am William Green, and I'm joined by Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis in Austin, Texas. Hi, Stephen. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Stephen and I were going to talk a little bit today about the pollination process of the Cattleya rex flowers that I have growing, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about the issue of when you have a Cattleya that has no roots or few roots, or the roots have rotted off. What are some strategies that you can use to try to save this plant? Now, Steve, Cattleyas, they grow up in trees. They've got these water storage organs called pseudobulbs, and these are there really to help the plant survive in times of not being able when there's basically no water, right? So a rootless
Yeah.
Cattleya, how would those pseudobulbs come into play when you have a plant that doesn't have any roots?
So the pseudobulbs will act as sort of a food reservoir um, for the plant. So, you know, removing the roots is probably, or even just repotting in general. In fact, Fred Clark talked about this in Houston pretty recently, about a week or two ago. And he says that, repotting is the single most stressful and destructive thing that you can do with your orchids.
Oh,
And then,
great.
of course, losing all of the roots is even more stressful and even more of a detriment to the plant. And so, if you happen to have one of these Cattleyas or some other species, and it's got big fat back bulbs or roots, back bulbs, that's where the energy stores are going to be, and that energy is going to be diverted into the new roots. Um, it, and of course, roots are incredibly important. Imagine if you, as a human being, you know, you have lost your ability to take in water. Let's say your mouth got ripped off, so you have to grow back a new mouth. Your hands got ripped off, so you got to grow back new hands. Obviously, that's not how it works for humans, but it's a similar thing. Losing your roots, you're going to lose that nutrient uptake, you're going to lose that ability to absorb water, and of course, in nature, a plant with no roots is dead. These guys, like you said, are sitting up on trees. So if the roots are gone, they're not going to be sitting in that tree anymore. They're really not adapted to disturbance at the roots in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, if you lose all the roots on your Cattleya, there's a really good chance you're going to lose the plant. But, as you alluded to, there are ways to coax your plant back into being uh, basically alive.
Right.
The plant without roots is nearly dead. It's basically dead, and it needs some serious help to revive.
Right. Well, why don't we go ahead and start the conversation with this, because it's definitely something that's heavily on my mind. Actually, the two plants that I had bloom, um, one of them actually, this is what's left of the bloom spike, because I actually took it off very shortly after using the pollen from the plant to pollinate the other one. Because the plant is just, there's very few roots on it. Most of the bulbs were shrunken, and the newest growth is still plump, but I thought, all right, the last thing this plant needs to do is try to expend all this energy to keep these flowers going. So I removed the spike, and now I'm left with a plant that it's been potted in one of those square air cone pots with I just hand picked some of the largest pieces of bark that I could find so that it would have a very open, airy mix. Try to allow plenty of air circulation around whatever's left of the root system. Um, and now I'm just kind of sitting there and hoping that the plant will realize that it won't be living for much longer without roots, and it will kind of try to push them out on its own. But what are some strategies or techniques that you know of that tend to help the plant decide to go ahead and push out some roots?
So one of the more common and sort of tried and true methods is called spag and bag. And what you do is you take a bag or some kind of a container. Maybe it's a big Tupperware container, or like an ice key container or whatever. And at the bottom, you have sphagnum moss or just holding water or some type of moisture in the bottom. And then above that, you're going to have your plant in sort of an enclosed or semi-enclosed environment so that the humidity is really high. Because what really kills these plants is their inability to uptake water. Um, so they've lost their roots. They're still going to be metabolizing, probably at night. And during that process, they're going to be losing water out of their pores. So as they're dumping water out of the pores, they're not taking it into the roots. So that's why the high humidity in the bag or some other device is so critical. It helps mediate some of that water loss and helps prevent the plant from desiccating.
The plant is able to take up some water through its leaves, correct?
Yeah, not as much as the roots. But more than anything, I think what it is when those pores open up, rather than having them dump out all the water, a saturated air environment sort of allows the water in the air to kind of move in and out of the pores rather than sort of a one direction going out of the plant, which would kill it, right? And so you can kind of keep them in that environment for a certain amount of time. It's not 100%. I've lost a lot of plants that way. I've revived some as well. Another thing that you can do to help is to use kelp max or some kind of kelp plant. You see a lot of these things called root stimulators.
Right. I actually do have some kelp max, and I'm wondering, I think he recommends it's like 1 or 2 ounces per gallon, but I wonder if like just soaking the plant in straight kelp max would have an accelerated effect, or...
So straight kelp max is probably not a good idea. You're still going to want to add water because suddenly you have a plant with no roots and you might burn it on top of the current situation. So,
right.
I would still use the same.
The recommended concentration.
Yeah, if you go to so kelp max is a product sold by First Rays. Ray Barkalow is the owner of First Rays. I think on his website he might have some guidance for this particular situation.
Okay.
Where you might want a more concentrated version of the solution that you soak the plant in. So let's say you do that first. You pop it in the bag and you kind of leave it there, maybe moving in and air out a bit, before you go to work, and then maybe after you come home, you get some fresh air in there, so it doesn't get stale, and hopefully you're not getting mold. But yeah, and keep an eye out for that. I've had mold problems in that situation, so it's kind of a fine balance. You want the air kind of still able to circulate. You don't want it to just be a completely sealed off bag, like when you go to the fish store and you bring home a bag full of air and water.
Right.
You don't want it to be that extreme. So you use your kelp max. So actually, before then, you go to First Ray's website. You kind of see he's got a lot of stuff on his website. So he might actually walk you through. Not only do you soak the plant on one day, you're going to come back and do it a couple times after that.
Oh, wow.
He might actually have that. That wouldn't surprise me at all. He's got just an amazing array of information on his site. And then you'll put the plant in the solution, soak it for however many hours, and then you'll put it in the bag with some sphagnum or whatever. And then hopefully that will stimulate the plant to grow and put out some roots.
All right, so we have letting the thing dry out and seeing if the dryness will stimulate the plant to grow roots, which sometimes happens, right? When it's just completely dry, it'll kind of start throwing roots, trying to...
Yeah, and you can do that. Typically, that's more successful plants that already have a healthy root system. So they're still able to uptake the water and kind of replace the water that's being lost through metabolism.
Okay. So then we have chemical stimulants like these kelp-based fertilizers like Kelp Max that can kind of help the plant to push out some roots. I'm finding on, vigorous hybrids, they're much more willing to put out roots than on a species which may or may not like to do things out of a particular order, right? It's like put out the new growth, then put out the roots, then put out the new growth, and it doesn't like to really deviate from that cycle.
Yeah, the species a lot of times can be a little more tricky, a little more unforgiving in this particular situation, certainly. So we'll see. It can be tricky and it can be frustrating, but there's a good thing you have a ton of plants over there of the same, so you can kind of experiment.
Right. Yeah, well, now at this point, yeah, and I've experienced this in the past when they were growing in Kentucky. I had them outside, and our summer season is just rain and storms all summer long, basically. And so even the mounted plants, their roots were staying wet for days at a time. And I even noticed deterioration of the roots on the mounted plants. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you can't get much more air circulation than a mounted plant, correct? So, yeah, it's just become very apparent that the plants, their roots need to dry out between waterings. That doesn't mean they couldn't be watered 3 times a day. It's just that there needs to be a cycle of wet and dry with those things. And so I've noticed that now I've got things potted in clay pots. I've got them in the air cone pots. I've got them mounted. I've got them in net baskets. So I've got them potted in all kinds of different situations to try to find that happy spot where they have access to moisture, but they also have plenty of access to air.
Sure, and I know you've been pretty public about your snail battles as well. And
Oh my God.
it sounds like
I've gotten to the point now where I just take a picture every time I see a snail.
yeah.
I just want to, I mean, every single one of them.
Yeah.
I think my next strategy is, the snail pellets didn't work. The diatomaceous earth, I mean, I took a little video of a snail crawling right through it, so that didn't seem to work.
That's
The next strategy is I did take a little guinea pig snail and sprayed it with hydrogen peroxide, and it immediately recoiled into its shell. I don't know if that means that it was dead, but it didn't like it. So I think my next strategy might be to flush them with hydrogen peroxide.
I would be careful about putting hydrogen peroxide in the roots. I have killed roots with hydrogen peroxide in the past.
Really?
I wouldn't do that. There's some pretty intense chemicals. The only thing that I know how to kill bush snails is through the chemicals, and it's like this purple soup you kind of have to put together, and you dip the plants, and it comes out, and everything's stained purple, and it's a mess. And I don't even know that I ever really got rid of the bush snails that way. At this point, I just kind of live with them, and every time I repot, if I see some, and the bigger the media, the more air that's in the media, the drier the media.
Right. It's more discouraging for them.
It is for the snails, and they'll kind of go away.
Right.
I think you've kind of found that with your mounts. You don't see any.
Yeah, I never see them on the mounts.
Yeah. So to me, that's really your best bet, is to get them into clay pots, big bark, large grade bark, or mount them.
Yeah.
And that should take care of the snails.
All right, let's
something you do for if you're able to get this Cattleyas rex, get its roots back growing, maybe mount that one, or try it in the clay in the large grade pot.
Right. Yeah, we've got to keep working on it. All right, we're going to take a quick break here and see if we can recalibrate our sound, and then we'll be back in a second.